Doing well. Happy New Year to everybody. We'll get this sucker kicked off because we got to. Hey, good deal. We'll get things kicked off and get things rolling. Last month we started the 12 steps to winning federal business. Just completing my ebook for that's going to be released in the next hopefully month. Gosh, it's like giving birth, crying out loud. Although I never did that. It just seems like it. I am Dave Lowe. I'm the CEO of isiFederal, and normally I'm down in the Baltimore, Washington area, but today I'm up in Detroit, Michigan with Dynamic Computer Corporation and meeting with those folks here. So it's awesome to be up here, even though it's freaking frigid up here. And with us we have Jamie. Say hey, Jamie.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jamie Zell of GSAproposal.com. How's everybody doing?
I think everybody's awesome. And also with us today we have Pete Chesner. Say hey, Pete.
Good morning, everyone. This is Pete Chesner. I'm with McQuaid Consulting.
Awesome.
Benefit Consulting.
Yes, sir. We're going to get to a couple of things with Pete in just a minute. Also, we have Amy Dover. She's the president of, is it Lyric Point? Is that how you say that? Amy?
That's right, Dave. Thanks so much. I'm Amy Dover with Lyric Point Consulting, and I work on strategic business planning for small businesses. So thanks for having me, Dave.
Hey, certainly. I'm glad you can be here. Amy also has some history in the federal space, so I always invite everybody to throw in whenever they'd like to as far as the having insight on what's happening out here in the marketplace in the federal space. And today, the numbers that matter most are 259 and 624. And if you don't know what those are the days until September of this year and September of next year. And the reason why we talk about that is because September is the most important time in the federal space. If you take a look, this is a pretty generic type of chart that happens in almost every industry. And each one of these peaks right here are September. And as you can see, every year September looks like that. Contracts spike tremendously in that in almost all industries. So we can talk about that some as well. Now, some housekeeping here. If you would like to talk with us and chat with us, because we have some folks here that we'd love to have you connect to. And if you go up in the corner, you'll see the ability to be able to chat, where you can talk to everybody or you can talk to an individual. And also, if you enter your audio pin, if you dialed in by phone, make sure you enter that audio pin so that we can talk to you and unmute you as part of the process. So if you have any questions about that, you can text or shoot it in the chat area or questions, but we'll definitely be able to talk with you guys. A little bit about the sponsors. isiFederal we do business development into the federal space. We work primarily with small businesses, although not exclusively with them. And we generally spend a lot of time in helping folks understand the marketplace with intelligence. We provide marketing services into the federal space in doing an assist and management type of process where we can either help your folks internally if you have people that are qualified, or we can do the grunt work within the federal space, including dedicated representation and feet on the street in the D.C. area, and that includes Northern Virginia and Maryland, where most of the federal government is operating, and most of the decisions may take place, although we do travel outside of that as well. We kind of serve as your federal business development sales force. And with us we have GSAproposal.com. We have Jamie Zell, as he mentioned before. Tell us a little bit about you and what happens in the federal government when it comes to GSA schedule development and management, Jamie.
Well, on the GSA side of the house, we do new GSA schedules where we build a GSA proposal that goes off to the procurement officer, and once we go through the approval process, becomes your awarded GSA schedule. And that's a schedule that is going to last for 5 years initially, is renewable 3 times over its life cycle. So your initial GSA investment will carry you up the road 20 years to use that as a purchasing vehicle with the federal government to automate purchases, and also prove that you have good credentials in business, that you're a stable company with good past performance, and even your pricing has been certified as approved, or has been approved as certified to be competitive within the marketplace. And as important as getting the schedule is also making sure your schedule stays current throughout its life cycle, and we help with that too. We do revisions to schedules. Companies come to us and want to do economic price adjustments, whether they want to add new products or new services or make any kind of adjustments to the schedule. We help with that too. We've been at this over 10 years now, and we do guarantee the award of the schedule. We've never missed. And any questions or any information you have that you'd like to know about GSA schedules, certainly let me know. We'll be happy to help any way we can.
And that's why I love Jamie, because he loves the paperwork, and I don't. So I appreciate you being there. And I send all my GSA components to gsaproposal.com because they have a 100% track record. And you're welcome to reach out to them directly too, so you don't have to worry about that. And I just really encourage you, if you're interested in getting a GSA schedule, and GSA schedules are important because they're usually the easiest vehicle to be able to get in order to do business with the federal government, and that's why we reach out to them. Also, Sean's not here, but Revolution Payments is a merchant card services company with level 3 payment compliance. And the reason why this is important is because if you've done anything with credit card processing, you know, and you're in the federal government, you know that that can be a huge chunk of your profits that go out. And large ticket items can be below 1.5%, even less than 1%. So it's really important that that if you're looking to do business with the government, that you take a look at somebody that understands that from the payment side, because that is a huge part of your profitability. And as I mentioned, I'm up here with DCC, and Sean's group helped with DCC as well. So that's why we make sure that you guys know about that. Some of the hot issues today. We're going to be planning an upcoming webinar, and I don't know if we actually solidified this or not yet, Pete, but Pete Chesner's with us, and we're talking about federal contract and health care reform, because this is impacting small businesses, and some of those are dramatic in the federal space. And what we want to do is make sure that Pete gets a chance to be able to give us a taste for what's happening there. Say hello again, Pete. You still there, boss?
Hello, everyone. And
there he is.
Thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah, no worries. Tell us a little.
All right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
and there's three things that we're going to be concentrating on, Pete, and one of those is how benefits affect your competitive bids, because we're talking about profitability here and the ability to be competitive in the space. The ACA's effect on cash benefits as opposed to cash versus benefits, I should say, and then whether or not the government contractors are exempt from some of these things, because there's a lot of questions out there. So give us a high-level overview of what you do and how the Healthcare Act is affecting these businesses.
I'd be happy to, and thank you very much. Again, my name is Pete Chesner, and I am with Employee Consulting, and we are an employee benefit consulting firm, and we have a few clients that are in the Service Contract Act, government contracting world, and this is what sort of triggered my communication with Dave and seeing what I can do to help him in his goals to assist the federal contractors. But what essentially happens is that I took a look at the Affordable Care Act and with my contractors that I work with, and they had this sort of overall feeling that they were exempt from the Affordable Care Act simply for the fact that they are government contractors. It is a government law, and that if there was an expense or a cost that was associated, it would be made up in the bid, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. And we did our research to be able to give good advice to our clients and found that the Affordable Care Act does, without a doubt, 100% affect government contractors with regards to what we call the shared employer responsibility, which is the $2,000 or $3,000 penalties that you might have heard of. One if you do not offer coverage at all, or the second one at $3,000 if your coverage is either not at minimum essential benefits and or unaffordable to your employees, meaning more than 9.5% of their income. So in our experience in the past, we have had the uncomfortable experience of helping a contractor move from giving their employees cash to benefits in lieu of cash. And before this act was passed, that was a very difficult conversation to have with those employees because they expect that cash and they feel that it is money being taken away from them by their employer.
And to be specific with that, real quick, Pete, it's like let's say you're paying somebody $10 or $11 an hour, and then instead of getting them benefits or apportioning a dollar amount per month for benefits, you're paying them cash like $2 or $3 an hour additionally, which what it winds up turning out to be. And the next thing you know is when you go to pull that back, because now you're mandated by law, the next thing you know, you have a revolt on your hands and your productivity is affected. There's a lot of things that can be affected by that, not the least of which is your profitability, certainly as it applies to cost-plus contracts, which is what you were talking about as well. So go ahead with that. Sorry, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Exactly. So in the past, when a contractor would want to make this change, it was due strictly to profitability. You add that $3.71, let's say, and you have to pay payroll taxes on top of that. Now, if you're bidding with another contractor that is providing benefits in lieu of that, in lieu of the cash, they do not have that payroll tax on top of that money they're providing to their employees, and they can be more competitive in their bids, as well as the employee benefits are a tax deduction. What I think is a very strong benefit to government contractors is now you have an excuse to take your employees from cash to benefits in lieu of cash, because the Affordable Care Act demands that you offer employee benefits, health insurance, or you'll suffer a penalty if your employer group has more than 50 employees. So what we are trying to help the contractors understand is exactly how to put a plan in place, how to do it right, how to communicate to the employees, how to enroll those employees, and then how to interact with those insurance carriers so everything runs smoothly and the employees do look at it as a benefit and appreciate it. And we have learned and have gotten opinions from the government that the Affordable Care Act does apply to government contractors. And the way that you avoid the penalty is that when you're giving those employees that money in cash, it is considered employee money, meaning that the contractor doesn't get any credit for that. And so you fail the affordability test of the Affordable Care Act. If you give that money, hold that money back from the employee and then give it to them in benefits, and whether it be health insurance or the remainder of it, if it's left over and there's more money after they pay their individual health insurance premium, the remainder of that money goes into a 401k plan that has you abide by the laws of the Affordable Care Act. You will not suffer the penalty, and then you avoid the expense of the payroll taxes, therefore being more competitive in your bid.
And that's exactly why I wanted to make sure people knew what was happening. This is much more of a compliance issue, which I'm going to be handing off to some other folks that do compliance stuff. But it is playing a role in my world coming into the bidding process, the profitability of doing business with the federal government. And that's why I'm glad that Pete's here. Pete, thanks for joining us. And if you have anything else you want to throw in there throughout this, we can also include that. I'm getting some kind of feedback, and I'm wondering where that's coming from. Well, we'll see what happens there. All right, so why are we here today? We're here today because the federal government is enormous when you're talking about the marketplace. There are literally billions of dollars, $500 billion spent annually with folks. There's 2.5 million contracts, and I want you to remember that number because we may talk about that in a little bit. 23% of these is supposed to be set aside for small business, and sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. But they buy everything all over the place. And that's why we're all interested. Now, the challenge is there's 85,000 buyers out there, and there's 470 agencies plus a bunch of sub-agencies as well, and they are the #1 customer in the world. And in case you're wondering what 23% of $500 billion is, it is $115 billion, which is a huge amount of money that gets apportioned to small businesses like you, most of you out there. And that's why we're doing what we do, because this market is incredibly large. So does the government buy what you sell? I can say yes, categorically across the board. If it's out there in the marketplace, the federal government buys it. And if you want to get in, now's the time to start thinking about what it is that you want to do. Now, I'm going to start this out with a warning, and the warning is, if it were fast, easy, and cheap, then everybody'd be able to do it. In fact, I was just sitting here with Farida, who runs Dynamic Computer Corporation. We were just talking about the same thing. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing fast about it, and there's certainly nothing cheap about getting into this marketplace. And there's plenty of places to waste your money. So does this sound risky? Well, I'm going to quote somebody that you may know. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And this is not a good personal friend of mine. I wish it was, but it happens to be Warren Buffett. So in order to make Warren happy, the only way that you can possibly mitigate that risk is really start to understand how the federal marketplace works, especially how it works around your company. And what we're doing is we're doing excerpts from a new book that I've written. Hopefully that's coming out. Lord have mercy, I hope it comes out soon, because we've been editing and going back and forth. But it's an e-book, and we're gonna pass that on to everybody. But it's the 12 steps to winning federal business, and the first 6 steps we went through in December, and that's to get smart about this marketplace. Make sure you understand what the market is and how it affects you. Develop a strategy around that about after you understand what it looks like. Don't just dive into this and say, okay, well, we'll do this for 6 months, and we'll invest some money here, and we'll try this, that, and the other thing. If you do that, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. Develop a strategy and look at how your competitors are doing it. If you look at the ones that are successful, the chances are you're going to get a really good indication of what you're up against in order to be able to compete. So we look at your competitors, specifically the ones that are direct competitors, and maybe some of those that you would like to aspire to be. Not necessarily the SAICs and all those big boys, but some of the ones that are within your neighborhood. And they're the ones that are putting your tax dollars in their bank account. If that doesn't irritate you enough, then I can't help you. But you're going to have to establish a budget around that. And so once you've developed your strategy, you're going to have to establish a budget to prepare yourself. Get your GSA schedule if you don't have one. Look at the additional schedules or purchasing vehicles that are out there and what your competitors are using so that you can start to position yourself. And it may take you years to be able to get to that place, but that's okay, because once you're in, and there's money that's being made. You need to dedicate, and I'll add the right resources, because if you just want to just put somebody on your staff to do it, chances are it's not going to work, because you need to have somebody that understands this marketplace. Then the whole objective is to build relationships with all of the stakeholders that are responsible for doing the sales within the federal government. And that's the first 6 steps. And before we dive into that, I'll add into a couple of things, and that we're reviewing, and that these are the people, these are the who that matter to you. Each one of these folks that are involved in the decisions revolving around your type of project, they have different roles, different needs, different buying motives, and different reasons for making the decisions that they make. And if you don't understand what they are, you're going to be selling the wrong thing to the wrong people. And that's not going to get you very far. And real quick, a high-level overview of these people. First, you have the project manager or the program manager. Now, these folks are on the operational side, but they're driving the initiatives. Sometimes they come down from the President of the United States. You see some of these things popping up in the news. Green initiatives, cloud computing, security, cost-cutting, cost savings, political things that are being driven, like healthcare. Huge political thing, right? So here they're looking for the new ideas and technology. They're not cutting-edge people, trust me, but they're still looking for some of the new components there. They are influenceable. And this is where you get in and start to help with those requirements and help them identify the requirements and the scope and getting ahead of those procurement opportunities. And when you get down to it, they want to get the job done right, and your job is to tie in with the initiatives and to help them look good. Now, one of those is understanding their world, and the other one is just a core human emotional thing where you're tying into something that helps them look good within their management structure and helps them feel good about making good decisions about hiring you. So those are the types of things that you're up against with project managers. Then you have the technical representative, and these guys kind of bridge the gap between purchasing and the operational side. They're generally risk averse because they're lower down in the organization. They assist in assembling the technical requirements. In other words, They're responsible for looking at other purchases that have happened out there, the government standards for those purchases. What are the certifications of the people that are going to be required, that will be mandatory in this opportunity? And this is important because these are the folks that you can influence, and you can say, hey, you really should have these certifications to make sure, ISO certification, ISO 9000, or the CMMI if it's a software program, or maybe it's just certain different types of licenses that are needed, or membership within organizations even. We've done all of those things when you're talking about giving some things that will separate you from the competition and provide them with a safety net of, hey, these guys are good and good at what they do. Your job, again, help them with the requirements so that they can get that stuff into the RFP, and, help them look good. Another core human emotion. Then we have the contracting officers, and these are the folks that have the money. These are the ones that are spending the dollars, writing the checks, and actually finalizing the contract agreements. They're busy. They have hundreds, sometimes thousands of opportunities that they're trying to sift through to award. They won't teach you how to do business with them, and this is critical because they have the money, and you better get to know these folks. And in small businesses, these are probably the most important people for you to know. They're risk averse, and that means they don't like to try new things. They're experts in moving paper. This is not to diminish what they do. They don't know what you do, and they don't really care what you do, but they want to know how you can help them get that paper moved off of their desk. And here we have, if you're talking about a purchasing mechanism, whether it's going to go out the full and open RFP, whether it's going to be restricted to maybe a sole source to an 8A or women-owned business or service disabled, they're the ones that are going to determine where this is going to go. This is why you've got to get to them and make sure that you get to know them. They administer the contract post-award sometimes. They definitely want the fastest way to purchase. And they don't want 50 competitors any more than you do, because 50 competitors means they have to read 50 different submissions to their RFP. So they're going to try to figure out a way to be able to diminish that number and still meet the requirements of the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR. So here's the deal. Easy is good. Let me repeat that. Easy is good. Make it easy for them. We're going to be talking about some of that in a few minutes, about how you can make it easy for them and make them feel valued. This is critical as part of how things work in the federal space. These folks get dumped on every day, and they have a hard job to do, and if you make them feel valued, that'll help. In fact, we're going to get to those critical points. Make it easy. How can you make it easy? Have your contract and contact information easy to find on your capabilities. If you want to sample capabilities, hit me with an email. I'll make sure you get one. Have the vehicle they like to use. If they don't use GSA schedules, no offense to Jamie, love them to death. But if they don't use a GSA schedule, you're stuck. Make sure you're going after the right vehicle. Make sure you're building on those building blocks of your GSA schedule, getting additional contract vehicles, whether it's C4D or NASA SOUP or whatever it happens to be. There's literally hundreds of contract vehicles. They may want to do a BPA, blanket purchase agreement, for their agency alone. No problem. Get them the way they want to do it. They may even help you get that. Provide them with filled out forms. Your standard forms, fill them out for them. Say, hey, if you want to procure this and it looks like this, then they can copy and paste and just put their name in on, boom. Very easy for them. Make it easy for them. That's critical point number one. Critical point number two, appreciate them. Think about the stereotypes that happen out there in the marketplace when it comes to federal workers. They work for us. We pay their salaries. They're just like DMV workers. Oh my gosh, if that doesn't just make your head explode. So those are the types of things that you have to be aware of, because these things filter into your speech, they filter into your being, and they filter into your communications with these folks. And you need to get those things unplugged and make sure you're not giving those. Reframe what you believe about federal employees so that you are appreciating what they do. Remember, they control millions, sometimes tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent in your industry. So get in the habit of really appreciating what they do and what you believe about federal employees. So we can talk about that a little bit more. We'll get into some of the details here as we look into steps 7 through 12 in the 12 steps of winning federal business. All right. we went through, we're building those relationships. You're going to have to learn how to win. And if you take a look at that second place sticker, that you don't get any money for being second place. However, you're moving up the food chain. You're going to be learning new things. You're going to be learning how things work in the federal space. You're going to have to invest the time and get your teeth kicked in a little bit. I don't care what you do. Everybody that we work with winds up getting their teeth kicked in a little bit because you got to figure out how you're going to become relevant to these people. And a lot of that deals with executive briefings and procurement briefings and making sure that you're out there in front of those folks. Sometimes it takes 2 years before you start to get at least some traction in the federal space. Don't get discouraged. Use whatever you can to get there. Executive briefings and procurement briefings, we went through them on a couple of webinars last year. You can do a YouTube, on our YouTube channel, you can find that. This is also a way to stay relevant. You got to be in front of these people on a regular basis. You got to be making the phone calls, doing the follow-ups, checking on them, seeing how they're doing. Personally first. Talk about them personally first. See if you can start to develop some of those personal relationships. That's where you'll start to garner some of those opportunities. And when you have an opportunity, be responsive. Make sure that you're making the effort to talk with them about that. Some of the things they may want to think about, some of the questions and answers that you may want to include for some clarification that may keep them out of trouble. And if you do lose, which you will lose, ask for formal debriefs. This is where the contracting officer and you sit down, sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone, but sit down with them and say, hey, what can we do better? How did we screw this up? What would have made the difference? Sometimes it's price, most of the time it's not. So if it's not about the price and you're missing something in your technical response, and Amy, you can jump in here too because you've done plenty of technical responses. And when you're talking, tell us a little bit about formal debriefs. Have you done a bunch of formal debriefs, Amy, just to pull you into the conversation?
You know, I haven't done a ton of formal debriefs, but it's incredibly important to understand what it is that you're doing right and what it is that you're doing wrong and how you can make that adjustment for that specific customer. Because you're spending all of this time building that relationship with them. And
you're spending time doing the proposal. And you're doing your response.
Absolutely.
So definitely don't just turn into a bid machine that doesn't pay attention. And if you ask for a formal debrief, the chances, I mean, they may not give it to you all the time, but they're supposed to. They're supposed to give you a debrief. And at the very least in writing what you did wrong. But what I love about the formal debriefs is sometimes you can't get to these folks without it. Sometimes you don't even talk to these people. You have to bid in order to just be able to talk to them. So in this instance, get out in front of them and say, hey, what can we do better? And some of the things that you can do there to stay relevant, and that's one of the ways to stay relevant, just ask them questions. Who doesn't want to know that their advice is valued? Everybody wants that. And that goes to one of the key decision-making, the key points for their buying motives is to feel valued. So one of the 7 ways to stay relevant. An updated capability statement. I would do this quarterly whether you change anything or not. Just make sure you're sending them out. At least quarterly, that's 4 touches a year. And then you can talk about it if you want to. And this can include new contract vehicles, new certifications that you guys have. If you have those, make sure you update your capability statement, shoot it out to them. And if it happens to be more than 4 times a year, great. And then you have things to talk about. New product offerings. How many folks out there are doing new development of new things and they want to get the word out there? Hey, let the folks know. Hey, we just wanted you to know. I'm not sure if this even fits in your world, but hey, I just wanted you to know. It's a topic of conversation. Contract wins. Guess what? We just won Seaport E. How about that? I know that's a Navy contract, but it shows that we're playing in the space and people care about what we do. Get that out there. If you know of personal interests. Now, the only way you're going to know about personal interests is if you're talking to the people. But if you find out that they're a Denver Bronco fan and the Broncos, right? They're in the championship game, and the Ravens aren't there to take them out this year. So the thing of it is here we are. You can talk about things of personal interest, but you have to have that personal conversation. And when you do, this cements relationships. This is what keeps you relevant in their eyes. Sometimes you may have a referral to another company. Just last week, I was talking with one of the contracting officers. I said, what do you got on your desk that you can't fill? They said, we got this this hazardous material that's out in Portland, Oregon. And we got this hazardous material, and I don't know who to go to. So I'm out there trying to find people for them that I can refer to. Why? Because that makes me relevant to the buyer. And that's exactly what we do every day. Referral to a colleague. Hey, did you know that Sam in this other department, he's in your world. He's kind of looking into this too. Maybe you can help him. Again, ways to be able to enhance your value in their eyes and get them some good exposure. Oftentimes, they don't get exposure up through the food chain. I can tell you that if you're looking for a referral from one of these folks, they'll refer peer-to-peer pretty easily. They're not going to refer you to their boss very often, and they're certainly not going to refer you to their boss's boss. So if you get exposure to their boss's boss and you tell them, hey, I was working with John over here, just a good guy. Just want to let you know, I know that he doesn't get a whole lot of interface, so, I'd love to introduce you, I'd love to kind of make a connection here where you're actually talking to his boss's boss, sometimes his boss's boss's boss. This is a good thing. And having that kind of good exposure with them doing a good job, those attaboys, those are the kind of things that are really, really hard to come by and get you good connections and keeps you relevant in the federal space. Make sense? Step 8, leverage those relationships that you're building. People still buy from people they like. I don't care where you are. It happens out of the federal government. It happens in the federal government. People still buy from the people they like. And your job is to get them to like you. And that means you got to contact them. You got to meet with them. You got to follow up. And you got to ping them. If you're not doing that, and it has to happen for lengths of time, and I mean lengths of time being year, 18 months, sometimes before you even get a warm conversation. Now you could say, I just don't have time for that. Okay, fine, stay out. Stay out of it. You need to have the intestinal fortitude and the pieces in place in order to be able to continue to build these. And this includes existing relationships within if you're already doing business with the federal government, you've still got to make these relationships work. And leverage those existing relationships for additional connections. And if you don't know who to go after, talk to me. We'll get you those folks. And you can take it right to your existing relationships and say, hey, do you know these 25 people? And they're going to know somebody. And then you can start to manufacture some of those connections and those referrals for what you're doing. And then when you're doing this, I love stalking people. You got to find them. Sometimes you've got to get in front of them. We're talking about several CIOs that we're stalking right now, and we're looking for where they're going to be keynoting so that I can go make myself known there, so at least I can put a face with a name, because you can't get to them otherwise. High-level decision makers and top-down still does work in the government, and you don't have to go to the president to get it. You can go higher on in the organization if you know who's there. And then you can get the referrals down through the organization. It still does work, and it's still very effective. You have to be careful because nobody likes people dropping on their head and dropping names, but you do it right, and it still does work. And here's the other thing. You can identify resources that will help you pursue those leads. That could be somebody from isiFederal. It could be somebody else. You may need a general or an admiral to be able to penetrate an account if you're talking about someplace in the DOD. Or you may need some senior executives to be able to put on staff for a little while to get you into some of these places. That's all part of the process. That's all part of the game. So those are some of the additional resources. And this is where you want to be looking. You want to be looking for the opportunities, the hidden under the radar opportunities that are good for your company. And some of those, they're never going to hit the street. And that's what makes them under the radar. They never hit the street. Because if you take a look, remember we said there are 2.5 million contracts? I want to show you something real quick. Right now, there's 17,900 active opportunities on FedBizOps. That's where a lot of folks are going to send you, right? But if you look at the past 365 days, let's just see how many were actually done. Now that's not all of them, so that's a terrible example. Not exactly sure what happened here. But there's usually about 125, 130,000 of those. Now, there's 2.5 million contracts. Where are the rest of the 95% of those contracts that are under the radar opportunities that never hit the light of day? They may be going to sole source. They may be competed between 3 GSA schedule holders. Those are the ones that we're after. And guess what? Winnable opportunities come from people, not from monitoring. And that means those relationships become key and core to what you're doing. And sometimes they take years to be able to develop because they already have people that they're working with. Okay? Let's see. We have a question real quick. How we'll be able to get a copy? Yes, we will make this presentation available. Sorry. Thank you very much for that question. Any other questions? You can hit me with questions or raise your hand, and I'll be glad to get to you. Let me make sure there's no other questions before we move on. And I think I answered Hal's question. Okay, good deal. That was the only question so far. So, step 9 is to influence the scope. You need to get ahead of this opportunity. You need to make sure that you're starting to get your solutions baked into that scope of work, if you will. So rule number 1 is if you didn't influence the scope, your competition did. That's the rule. If you see something come out, if anything hits FedBizOps, anything that hits GSA eBuy, anything that hits NICO, anything that hits any other mechanism for bid, you can be sure that your competition has had their fingerprints on it somehow. Sometimes it's multiple competitors, sometimes it's only one, because that's what your job is, that's what you need to do. You need to get in there and start to influence the scope of work. So with rule number 1, you want to be the one that's doing that influencing, so you better get familiar with their procurement processes. If you don't understand how things work in their organization, how in the world are you going to help them write a scope of work? So one of the things you can do is insert yourself as the expert. And what we mean by that is you start to develop that relationship and start feeding them information, inviting them to executive briefings, procurement briefings, and saying, hey, we're going to be reviewing this cloud computing initiative. We'd love to have you sit in on it. Or we'd love to come down and show you, give you a high-level overview of how this is affecting you and the gotchas that you can have. How can you keep yourself out of hot water as a contracting officer to make sure that works? And that providing good market information. Some of that is your stuff. Some of that is just general market stuff. Here's what's happening in the market. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we mitigate some of those risks in the marketplace. Provide good ways to find good companies. And these are some of the qualifications, some of the certifications. If you're doing cloud computing, you better understand FedRAMP because that's your world. And the 3 PAOs, third-party authority to operate, right? ATOs, 3P ATOs. Anyway, so those are the things that are operating in certain segments. And it could be chemicals. It could be office supplies. If it's office supplies, you better understand FSSI. You better understand about that and be able to help them find the good companies like yours. And those are the types of things, if you're going to compete against a few. I'm up for competing up to 4 or 5 companies. I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to compete against 50. And they don't want 50 any more than you want them. Again. So, and guess what? Most RFPs are not reduced to just price. There's usually a pricing factor that's built in. And a lot of times it's 4 to 1, where the technical response is 4 times more important than the pricing structure. Sure, price becomes an issue, but not if it's 3 or 4 times the value of your technical response, where you can create those key differentiators and those certifications that become so important, and how your business processes run. So those are the things that are very, very important for making sure that you're up and getting in front of that RFP. Sometimes, and I'm telling you, you talk about a long range process. We're talking about 2, 3, 4 years down the line before you really start to get this right. And a lot of that revolves around having a project internally so that you can start to really influence this. The next step is monitoring for opportunities. Even though you're building those relationships, you want to make sure that you're monitoring for opportunities so that you can understand who's bringing those opportunities out so that you can build relationships with them. That's part of that opportunity. And we just talked about some of the FedBizOps. The fact of the matter, the stuff that you talk to your small business liaison, you talk to your folks in the federal government, they say, we got to go to FedBizOps, that's where we post everything. Is that true? No, it's not true. That is not true. And here's the reason. Anything below $25,000 does not have to go to FedBizOps. Now, There's a lot of folks that their whole entire business revolves around things that are less than $25,000 on a regular basis. And maybe repeat business, but a lot of stuff is below $25,000, right? So here we are. If it's less than $25,000, it doesn't even have to hit. The other things that don't hit, 95% of things don't hit Fed Biz Ops. Micro purchases that are less than $3,000. Obviously, if it's less than $25,000, it's not going to hit. But $3,000, they can do this on a credit card, and that's up to $3,500. As a matter of fact, most contracts under $25,000, sole source contracts like 8As and others, and set asides for small disadvantaged businesses and things like that. Nope, they don't hit. GSA competed opportunities. They may pick 1 or 2 or 3 GSA schedule holders to be able to compete an opportunity with. GSA eBuy opportunities don't hit Fed Biz Ops. And these are opportunities that only go to GSA schedule holders. They're not going to see them. Fed bid opportunities don't hit. I hate Fed bid, by the way. Don't get me started, but I don't like it. But they don't hit at Fed Biz Ops either. BPA calls, IDIQs, task orders don't hit Fed Biz Ops. The under-the-radar contracts, these are all under-the-radar contracts. They don't hit Fed Biz Ops. These are the things that you're after. These are the ones that you want. Also, real quick, the short fuse year-end opportunities. These are ones that are happening in August and September, especially when you get to September. Things that used to take 3 or 4 weeks now take 3 or 4 days to complete, from conception to award. This is why everything you do should revolve around September. And you just pick something up in the middle of the year, great. That's great. But make sure that you're looking at stuff for year-end opportunities and getting yourself established. Get those relationships in place so that when they do hit, bam, you can win stuff. So where's your sweet spot when you're monitoring for those opportunities? What agencies hit your sweet spot? You need to know these things. And who within those agencies hits your sweet spot? All of these things very important for you as you're getting into the federal government to find those under-the-radar contracts so that you can get to the wins. Then you get to the place where you're in bid response and proposal development. You're going to have to watch out because this can be very expensive. We just did NASA Soup, for instance, and that was tens of thousands of dollars worth of time, effort, and costs for resources to get that submitted. Some of these can be very, very expensive, and you can usually look at how much that's worth and do a calculation of a percentage or two for that. Let's see what we have here. Oh, here we go. Hal just popped in and said, whoa, go back to your opinion on Fed bid. Help us how to get around these people. Yes, sir. We'll talk a little bit about that. I love it. Hang on a second, Hal. Let me see. Did you type in your you have the ability to talk, or do you just have the ability to text? Let me send you your audio pin in case you need it. Because if you need your audio pin, I can't unmute you because you don't have the ability to unmute. But yeah, Fed bid is a son of a gun. I'm not a big fan. We can talk about that. See if you can get yourself in, and I'll get you unmuted. We'll talk about what you do a little bit. When you're doing this right, you'll be able to maximize your influence, which will minimize your investment on these RFP responses. You're still going to have to spend money and resources on it. You have to spend time. It's going to take time and effort, but you can minimize your investment by maximizing your influence. So much so that you could supply a sample scope of work and they could use that. If you can't answer your own scope of work, then you better stop and just go do something else. You should give them scopes of work that are just really, really crafted for what you want to do. So step 11 is improve your positioning, okay? Remember, every sale is strategic. If you haven't read Miller Hyman's Strategic Selling, read it. It's all over the place with this. The problem is your decision makers are all over the place. And sometimes you can get shot by a bullet that you don't even see, which is why I stayed away from the government for so many years and stayed in the commercial sector. But you're going to be moving yourself through, you were fourth best to second best to now you're getting to a place where you're really competing for that first spot. And some of this revolves around what we call a POET analysis, which dealing with the political, the operational, the economical, and the technical ramifications of you winning. And who's responsible for that? If you're not paying attention, when you start to look at some of these, a lot of these aren't nearly as important, but if we start to get to the bigger type of opportunities in the federal government, you have political ramifications. How political is the healthcare thing? Huge, right? And yet, you still have a debacle like that. Somebody wins, you spend $100 million, can't get a website to work, right? It's crazy, right? So here we have, you can look at who's responsible, whose ox is going to get gored if you're the one that's chosen. Same thing happens here. Where are the political affiliations with your competitors? Where do they stack up? Who's operational? Who's responsible for the operational component, the economical decision from the financial side, and then the technical people, sometimes the users, oftentimes involved in that as well. So that is great. And if you know strategic selling by Miller Hyman, you'll understand the poet analysis as well. When there's an opportunity, asking the qualifying questions to see who's embedded there and make sure that you're the one. Did you know that if you have, if you're asking for certifications, that you can ask a question of whether or not they'll consider additional other certifications? And if you're the one, you'll see it. If you're the one that helped with craft the scope, your certifications will stay firm. Where if somebody else says, hey, will this certification work? They'll say no. And that's a great thing, because then you start to really understand where you are, and you can ask qualifying questions to find out where other people are in the RFP process by the type of questions that you ask in those. And then also your formal debriefs help you improve your positioning. Again, who doesn't want to be listened to when they have things? So definitely ask for those formal debriefs and perform them. Have them perform them. Very important to do. So step 12 is winning. And we'll go on a little bit further and talk about profitable wins. Because you're going to win some, they're not going to be so profitable. You're going to have to build yourself up into that. But you do all these pieces right, and you will capture the wins. You will develop the golden thing that you need, past performance, of doing a good job within that. You'll infiltrate the agency from the inside. You'll be able to start maneuvering because you'll be in under the tent. You've got to get in order to do that so that you know what's coming next before your competitors do. That gives you supreme advantage over your competition so that you can grow your influence and grow your contract. Whether that's a GSA contract, a BPA, IDIQ, doesn't much matter. All those, we want to get in the position of growing your contract, growing your influence, and getting there. And then you'll be the insider. Then you have to protect your turf from the inside. If you don't have anything to lose, you can keep going after these folks. The folks that have the most to lose are the incumbents. And they're the ones that, by the way, want to keep you out. And there are plenty of things happening right now. Right now, as a matter of fact, you have a bunch of the folks that are retiring, that are in procurement. They don't have the hooks in them anymore. So you have new blood coming in. We love the new blood. We love to build those relationships so that then we are the ones that they're turning to when they have new opportunities. Okay, real quick, get smart. Develop your federal strategy. Establish a budget. Prepare. Get yourself together before you go after it, and then dedicate the resources and go get them. Build those relationships with all of the stakeholders. Get to a place where you're learning how to win. Don't get too proud. Don't get too proud. Leverage your relationships. Influence the scope of work. Monitor for those opportunities. Improve your positions and win. And I will add one thing. Do not apply arbitrary timelines or budgets to your federal pursuit. You do not have the authority to determine how much it's going to cost you to get into the federal space, nor can you determine how long it's going to take. The only thing you can do is get in and push. And I can tell you, we could do a little faster, but it's still going to take time. So there you go. So, 2014, what can you do right now? First of all, ask yourself a question. Are you in? Do you want in? If you want in, this is what it's going to take. First, and then have you started? Have you actually started in 2014? Because guess what? We're actually in Q2 of 2014 in the federal fiscal budget. By the time we're done talking about this webinar and getting started, you'll be 4 months behind if you haven't started already. That's the reality of the matter. If you're setting yourself up for this September, you're already 4 months behind. So step one that you could do right now is get smart, identify your market, identify your competition, how they're operating, the key contacts, and the who that matters to you. These are the people that are most important to you in your federal pursuit, the people that are doing the spending. Now, what does this look like? It looks like this. You identify your market. Let's take a look at this small market here. It's only $9.4 billion. This happens to be IT security from a few years back, but I still like the numbers. And if you take a look, you see the average contract values, and you see the folks that are operating here. We say, hey, Computer Sciences Corporation, they did $248 million in IT security. Guess what? You can't have this market. This market's already sewn up. You can't have any of these big boys markets. They're deep, wide, thick. They have great relationships in the federal government. You can't have that part of the market. They're multi-billion-dollar corporations that are operating in that space, and you can't compete there. So, with this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. What is your sweet spot? Where can you find that? Then we take a look at this. Instead of looking at the total wins, let's take a look at the number of contracts. And we start to see 523. Do you know BPSI? Chances are you don't. But they booked almost $35 million of your tax dollars in IT security. You know a little bit about those guys that happen to be in the Army alone because they were already there doing other things. But let's take a look at some other people on this list that may not be, these are the top 25, but they may not be right at the top of that list, but we're getting closer to what I call the sweet spot, which is less than that $750,000. Let's get to some of these. How about 174 contracts for $5.9 million? Would you like to book some of that in your business? Or 150 contracts for $2.3 million. Would you like to put some of that? And what I love about these is take a look at the average size, or the largest. This is the largest. The average size is much smaller than that. The largest contract is $275,000, give or take. This is really important because these are the folks that are operating on under-the-radar contracts. Certainly they're not like setting the world on fire, but let me tell you something. They're doing everything right. Because you can see they're not getting, I'm telling you, their competition, not that much in there. The average is 33,970 and 15,329, well below the threshold of any of the major players out there. They don't even care. These are just crumbs. They don't even want it. They don't even want to go after it. They would rather you take it. And that's what we say, okay, we'll take it. All right? So, have you heard of any of these folks? Going back to these guys, the KT Consulting and JDG? Probably not. But they booked 324 federal contracts for $8.2 million. Those two companies. These are the folks that you want to emulate. These are the folks that are doing it right that you can also do it. If other people are doing it, then you can do it. And these are your tax dollars at work, by the way. If that doesn't bother you, can't help you. How about the agencies that fit your sweet spot? We know about Medicare and Medicaid. We know about those folks. Big boys spending $341 million. But what about the rest of these guys? Do you know about the Food and Nutrition Service, the Maritime Administration, Millennium Challenge Corporation? Do you even know they exist? Office of Thrift Supervision. Can't even say it. But these are the folks that are spending money too. But they're not hitting the radar because they're not hitting the street like they would normally hit the street. Largest contract was $180,000 for the Office of Thrift Supervision, 22 contracts for $395,000. Big fish in a little pond is what I think of. Most people know the U.S. Marshal Service from Tommy Lee Jones and those guys. But there's 24 agencies spending over $100 million in security, 70 agencies over $10 million, and 118 agencies over $1 million. These all rival Fortune 500 companies. This is where we want to live. This is what we want to do. So what about your competition? And I will say this will blow your mind. Most of the competition is not here. $7.775 billion, 82% of the contracts had less than 5 competitors. And for the number of contracts, 36,580 had 84% had less than 5 competitors. And take a look at this number up at the top up here where it says 23,654 contracts, 58.77%, no competition at all. This is where you want to live. It takes a long time to get there. Can't just get it today. Got to get in. The question is, where are they? They don't hit FBO. They don't hit eBuy. They're not bought on GSA Advantage. They're not publicly made available. These are the under-the-radar opportunities that is not opportunity-driven. It's from people that buy from people they like. Your job is to find them, get them to like you, and they're the who that matters to you. And here they are. These are competitors' contacts that are buying $4.5 million, 21 contracts. Now, this is where we dive into the specific competitors. We want to know these people because these are the ones that are buying from your fiercest competitors, as a matter of fact. What would you do if you knew who they are? These are your competition's best customers. What would you do if you knew Brenda, that she spent $387,000 with your competitor? Under the radar opportunity from agencies. Again, we have the phone numbers, we have their email addresses, we do the research. What would you do if you knew who they are? Would you, one, let them keep putting your tax dollars in your competitor's bank? No. You're going to go out and you're going to go get them. Any questions about this? We have a couple of questions here. Let's see. Where do you find the list of awards? Great question. The thing of it is with the list of awards, it's not the awards that matter the most. It's the people that are responsible for making the awards. And that's the missing link. It doesn't exist. You can't find the people responsible for making the awards. That's the research that we just showed you. We have it. That's where the list is, Patty. Thanks for that question. Let me see where you are. Patty? Patty, you there? Oh, I can't unmute you either. But I'd love to hear what you had to say. In fact, yeah, and then Sarah's asking, how do we get these lists? Where can we get these people? That's what we have. That's the Federal Marketing Essentials Package. That's what we do. We provide the key contacts who buy your stuff, your competitors' contacts. This is step one. This is the place that we always start with every one of our clients before we do anything. Your competitors' contacts, under the radar contracts, the breakdown of the agency spending, the primes and their contacts, so that we know who we can go after with the primes, as well as the people that are buying from the primes, the recommended action steps, and this is regularly $4,500, so you save $505 if you mention this webinar. And I said, there's nothing fast, easy, or cheap. This is part of the not being cheap. But this is what you need as far as getting into this. And real quick, we'll talk about William Scotsman, who's a #1 in their space. They do trailers, the temporary offices. They have, as you can see, some additional storage areas as well as more permanent type office spaces that you see, like these temporary classrooms and things that you see. That's William Scotsman. That's what they do. They have the vast majority of the marketplace. And yet, what do they say? They've been doing this for a long time. This is the best intelligence we've seen, 100% clarity into their market. And they actually had to change the way that they operated as a result. And link services, we find things that folks simply can't find on their own. That's what this is. This is step one. We don't even want to move in a direction until we know what the market has to say. So these are the key contacts, your competitors' contacts, most important. Under the radar contracts, the breakdown of agency spending, primes and their contacts, and recommended action steps. All of this revolves around this particular step. And there's over $400 billion in the next 259 days is going to be spent. So get in, start moving, start winning. Jamie, anything you want to add here? I've got a couple questions that I'm going to get out here in just a minute.
Quick,
go ahead.
Taking action for starters to go into the marketplace. There are contracts and purchase orders being cut as we speak, and if you're not winning those contracts, then you're losing those contracts. So you got to take action, and to know where to go, you got to get smart. I can't say enough about the marketing intelligence. It's super, super important.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate it. Always like to get good feedback, and Jamie and I work together a lot, and we pass things back and forth all the time. So if you need any GSA schedule work, get out there and get it. He'll be a good guy to reach out to. Pete, do you have anything else you want to add before we jump on with the upcoming webinar that's going to happen?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I just wanted to let everybody know that you could really use the passage of the Affordable Care Act to help contain your costs with your payroll and bring down your overall costs and help make your bids more competitive, and we can help you get through those steps.
Super. And we will be letting everybody know when that webinar is coming, and we'll keep all those pieces in play and make sure everybody knows what's happening with that. So we appreciate you being with us, Pete, and the next webinar is going to be February 11th at 2014 at 11 a.m. and we're going to be talking about reaching and influencing the federal buyers. That's going to be a key piece that we're after, and let me see what we have here. Patty asks, do you specialize by market? Hang on a second, Patty. Let me see if I can unmute you now. Hang on. You there? Nope, I can't unmute you. We do specialize by market, but we let the market determine what the special is, where we have to dedicate our efforts. And when we do the first step for step one, we say, hey, what does this market look like and what do we see? And then we'll talk about what you would need. And you missed the beginning of the webinar. Is it your background that enabled you to have? It's my background and a combination of my background in doing business with the government in the past, as well as the sales side of doing things a little bit differently that we do that gives us the ability to find the contracts that are out there. And we've been at it for the process we've been at for about 6.5 years. isiFederal launched about 4 years ago, and again, the first step being the intelligence piece and the marketing essentials is really where we concentrate our first focus to see if it's even worth it. Some of the folks that we've done business with, we actually took a look at the market and said, hey, I don't like what I see. And without you spending like a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time, I don't see it being able to be fruitful, and then they've decided to stay out of the marketplace, which is okay. That's okay. Believe me, I'd rather have somebody spend, and I've done this several times, where they've spent, $4,000 or $5,000 and just to find out that it wasn't worth spending $65,000 on a proposal. And I would much rather know if we can win before we get into it than not. So those are the kind of things that we love to do, and Amy can help as well. Amy, do you have anything that you want to pop in on for the last piece? We really appreciate you being here, and if you need any business advice, overall business strategy advice, I'd highly recommend you reach out to Amy. She's great at what she does. She does have some background in the federal space, so she can certainly help guide you into whether or not you should even be in this market. And there's plenty of folks that shouldn't be, right, Amy?
Absolutely. I love the fact that you started off by saying if it were fast and easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
And as there's $115 billion set aside for everyone here, and you embark on pursuing work in the federal space, it's really important that you take a step back and look at the current state of your business. And my question to all the listeners today is, can you maintain a thriving business while you make upward of a 2-year investment to enter into a new market?
That's right.
And I can help you to make that decision.
And guess what? There's no wrong answer to that except doing it when you shouldn't. There's no wrong answer, and I'll repeat that again, is that it's not for everybody to get into the space. 90% of the people that get into the space fail, and there's a reason for it. Most of the reason revolves around not understanding the market, not dedicating the right resources, and not having the intestinal fortitude to stay. If you don't have those pieces, you will fail. And plenty of GSA schedule holders, 80% of the GSA schedule holders fail. The new ones that just came are failing as we speak. Listen, let me tell you what a GSA schedule failure means. GSA schedule failure means you didn't meet a $25,000 minimum annually, and they give you 2 years to get your first $25,000. If you got in this industry, if you got in the federal government to make $25,000, you're in the wrong place. You got in it to make millions, but you got to go through $25,000 before you can get to $1 million. And if you don't have the intestinal fortitude And the GSA is telling you we're going to give you 2 years after you get your schedule, by the way, to make $25,000. It should be an indicator that you better be busting your butt from the time you start thinking about getting into the federal space to the time when that 2-year comes. Because I watch them happen all the time, and I get calls every day from GSA schedule holders that are failing. So don't do it. If you're not ready, don't get in it. There's plenty of things that you can do. You take 50 grand, go to Vegas, put it on red. They're gonna comp you for your room. You're probably going to see a show. You're gonna have a good time. Free drinks, everything. You'll have much better time, and you have much less of a headache, even with the hangover for the next day. But I'm telling you, man, there's plenty of money that's wasted, and plenty of effort that is totally wasted in the federal space, and that's what we're trying to keep you from doing. So find out about your marketplace. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my information. You can shoot me an email, and Jamie's information is here. And I'll definitely. Sorry, I don't have yours, Pete. I should have put yours up there too, and yours, Amy, as well. But if you want to talk to Amy or Pete, just shoot me an email. I'll be glad to get you their information. We'll shoot that stuff out as well. So thanks for joining us. Definitely love to have you involved. There's plenty of money out here. Plenty of money to be had. Just keeping your mindset straight on how to get it. Thanks for joining us. Our next webinar will be in the second week of February. I think that's the 11th, as we said before. Thanks again, Jamie, for joining us. Thanks, Pete, for sticking with us through all this. And I love what you do, too, and appreciate what you're doing. So have a great month, and we'll talk to you next month.